Hello there guys, and welcome to today's video. I have noticed something that is sorely lacking on the D&D community here on YouTube. And that is Dungeons & Dragons adventures and reviewing them, going through them for new DMs. Maybe giving some helpful tips about running these adventures. A couple of different things that I think could maybe impact the adventure a little bit more, alternate hooks, that kind of thing. Now, as you can probably tell by the book here in front of you, I'm not going to be restricting myself purely to books from 5th edition. Even though I have run many 5th edition adventures, or I should say encounters, maybe taking little bits from each book and throwing them in, I first started playing Dungeons & Dragons with 4th edition D&D. And as a result, I thought that I would start off with the adventure that I've run with, I think it's 4 different groups of people, and an adventure that I always tend to put new groups into, or I recommend new players use, and that is this one right here. This comes in the red box, which was essentially the starter set for 4th edition, and it is the adventure that it first has you play. Just a little bit of backstory to this book right here. When the players actually sit down with the red box to make their characters, it runs through a small little encounter with goblins attacking a cart that they're travelling on. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Lost Mines of Phandelver in terms of there's a dwarf on this cart and you've got to do something for the dwarf. However, they run through that adventure, and the adventure asks them in the player's handbook for, what would they do? Do they want to cast a spell? Do they want to try and sneak and attack from a distance? That kind of thing. And from that adventure, it recommends a character that they should play by their playstyle. It's quite a basic system, but it works, and the players really liked it. So, leading on from that is this book, which has the players tracking down the goblins into a goblin lair. Now, the really great thing about this book right here is that it doesn't waste time. We can see here, we are on page 4 right here, and it's already jumped into our first encounter. This book is also, it's quite thick. It contains a lot of information that even for 5th edition DMs is very useful. Now, I recommend for a first encounter, for a first adventure, for complete new players, people who've never played D&D before, that you sit down with them and you play a one-shot. One adventure that they can play and finish in one day. Now, there may be stuff that link that adventure to other adventures, and that's fine, but they're minor. They don't have to be followed. This adventure, for example, has a mysterious lockbox in it. Now, that lockbox can contain anything. And maybe in a later video, I'll talk about how I relate this adventure to the Lost Mines of Phandelver's, and I link the two together. Or how I link this adventure to a couple of others from 4th edition that I can simply convert over to 5th edition rules. And I'll show you how to do the same. However, with this particular page, an entry, you've a new Dungeon Master, you've just opened this book, and it's given you a map reference, as well as some really simple basic creatures that players will expect to fight. Now, this is a really great encounter because it's somewhat challenging for new players because the creatures are going to think tactfully. As well as that, it also gives you tactics for the creatures. It tells you right here, on the goblin's first turn, on the wolf's first turn, and on the goblin's later turns, and on the wolf's later turns. It tells you how exactly they're going to think about combat, which is brilliant. That makes the players think, wow, these aren't just monsters in a video game that are going to run straight up to me and attack. These are creatures that are thinking. These are creatures that are going to work together to try and beat us. We need to think tactfully. So you can see that Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition red box comes with a flip battle mat. This here is one side of the battle mat where the encounter is first going to take place, where they get attacked, or I should say ambushed by some wolves and some goblins. And now this is a very reusable battle mat in my opinion. On the flip side of this here, we have a monster lair. And I've used this for other adventures as well. what I actually chose to do was split the adventure right here into two. So what I did was, for the first adventure, I completely ignored the map that you're looking at now, and instead I decided to run this map as a different adventure for the players. However, if you want to run it all together, that's completely fine. Now guys, I will say that these maps were a very essential part of Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. It thought about combat very tactfully, like if your player character was here and a monster was behind you, then it would get advantage. So it got players to think about combat as this sort of wargaming style thing. That said, in 5th edition, it's not like that. You only really need the book, and then you can describe the rooms and what's going on. It has some really useful descriptions in here. And if I actually turn to the page to show you guys... Here we go. You can see that it tells you exactly where all the monsters are in this certain map area. And you can see that there would actually be a white dragon in this area here, and filled with kobolds in this area. And it gives you, in the red bits, descriptions of all the areas here. And that's really great, because you can simply find where the descriptions are, read out those sections, and they're very short. They allow you to elaborate on certain points and to really get the adventurers' minds working. Now, this map isn't split into two. This is all just one huge map right here, and I really appreciate that. I gotta be honest, I really liked it. There was only one section of this map that I've ever really disliked, and that has been this bit here, which is essentially a giant chess puzzle. Now, you can use that if you want, but I personally prefer to throw any sort of traps in there. I would make it so that, you know, only certain coloured tiles, or there was a certain pattern they had to get through it. I turned it so that the room was filled with ice and all that kind of stuff. Additionally, when they eventually work their way to the second half of this dungeon, they'll be faced with a great first villain, and that is a necromancer, guys. So for their first ever adventure, they've waded through this army of kobolds and goblins. They've negotiated with a dragon, and they've come face to face in this random chamber right here, which is like a research chamber, with this evil necromancer. And there he has the lockbox, and he has several skeletons and zombies with him, some of which are giant and monstrous, because I gotta be honest, guys, the monsters in Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition were really interesting. And I recommend that you sort of have a look at some of them and see what you can find. One really good thing, guys, is that in the back of this book comes a couple of monsters and statistics. And one thing you'll notice is that a lot of monsters in 4th edition have minions, which basically means that they have 1 health point. So this right here, guys, is a minion. You see it has 1 hit point. It has an armor class, which means any hit kills them. However, it still deals damage. Now, the benefits of using minions is that the players don't know which ones are minions. So they might go into a room and see a room filled with creatures. Oh no, they're outnumbered. They know, monsters go first. The monsters attack them with their short bows, right? Some run in with short swords and deal 4 damage to the players. Wow, okay, it's looking bad. The fighter turns around and swings back at one of the creatures and just kills it instantly. Now all the players know, hang about, these guys are weak. We can take these. They're going to do a lot of damage. They're going to maybe turn the tide of battle using minions. But the players can wade through this army of creatures, destroying them easily. And I use minions in 5th edition. Only now and then, only to bolster fights. But because players in 5th edition are less used to minions, it comes as even more of a surprise and even more of those epic role-playing moments. So I highly recommend at least stealing the idea of minions for your own campaigns. But minions are used very much in this dungeon right here, guys. Minions are used throughout 4th edition, and I highly, highly, highly recommend running through this map. So guys, if you have actually picked up this adventure, you'll notice that this is a one-shot adventure, and you notice that I'm very excited talking about it because I have a lot of experience running through this adventure and interesting things that I like to throw at a group of new players that maybe get them to think differently than they normally would. It's not a video game, so whatever you say goes. Change it up, make it interesting. First things first, guys, they've come into this dungeon because they're looking for a lockbox, right? That's the whole purpose of them coming in here. Now, if they go straight to the necromancer, he might not necessarily have the lockbox. One thing you can do is in this room right here, which is sort of, it's on the far end of the dungeon, and it's opposite the necromancer's chamber. They can actually find a doppelganger. You can see the layout right there. That there is a doppelganger. Now, what I have the doppelganger do sometimes is take on the form of the dwarf that asked them to find the lockbox, and maybe try to persuade the players to go away. Alternatively, throw a couple more guards into this encounter, and what you've actually done there is you've created a massive distraction so that the doppelganger can slip in with the party. Now, I've already talked about Dungeons & Dragons being a role-playing game. What they feel when they enter this area of the chamber, now, this is actually one of the first places they can enter. They basically enter here, and you can see that this chamber is home to a dragon right there. Now, this is fantastic. There's loads of kobold minions here, so the kobolds can rush forward and start hacking at players and trying to kill them, but they feel this unnatural cold in this area. And it's only when they get here that they realise, oh shit, there's a dragon. Now, they don't know that this is actually a dragon fledgling, but you can see by the hit points and the AC that this dragon right here is very deadly and can and will kill a group of first level heroes. So what do they need to do? Well, they can attack it, they can retreat, or they can try communicating with it. And in this book, there is a full skill challenge of talking to this dragon. Now, I went completely off book for this one, and I'll tell you why. What I had is the dragon used to own this entire dungeon until the necromancer moved in and sort of restricted the dragon to sort of one area using his alliances with goblins and his undead minions. So the dragon can actually offer the players a reward, an additional reward, for getting rid of the necromancer. Now, the first time I ran this dungeon, I decided to go down this route, and my players went for it. And what they ended up doing was going down a series of campaigns and a series of adventures that led them into favour with dragons. So they would help any dragons that needed help in dungeons and things like that. And it was a lot of fun. Role-playing this dragon, it offers a really great opportunity to throw some new ideas in there. Now, I'll tell you right now, guys, that what you can actually do is you can sort of forebode or you can hint at adventures like the Rise of Tiamat and the Horde of the Dragon Queen through interactions with this dragon. For example, the players might think or they might know that dragons have been extinct or something like that, and it might lead into sort of conversations that you can throw in little tidbits of information or hint at upcoming adventures. It's a really useful one here, and the characters can gain favour with this powerful creature. Or they can have a really interesting combat where they find out for the first time that they can die. And sometimes that never happens. Sometimes DMs will do everything to keep their players alive. But an encounter with a dragon is a brilliant opportunity to see which players are going to run first, which players are going to try to survive above all else. Is the dragon going to chase them, or is he going to just keep this very small combat area his? Maybe he's going to throw breath weapons down this corridor here. They can run into really interesting conversations, and even more interesting combats. So I highly recommend this adventure, even just for this interaction. Well guys, there you have it. That is sort of a brief overview of what this adventure is, and some of my recommendations for the interesting encounters that happened. Now you'll notice that 4th edition D&D is a lot of fighting, and that's true, there is. The stat blocks and converting them to 5th edition isn't too difficult. It's all about just reducing the amount of damage they do for some of the enemies, but it's mostly about reducing the enemy's hit points. Goblins, for example, might have, quite a high number of hit points in 4th edition. Reduce that down to maybe 1 or 2 hits and they'll fall, and you'll have a 5th edition ready encounter right here. As well as that, the maps that come with this adventure are fantastic and can be reused and reused and reused. So I really recommend this to all players, and as I said, I use this adventure as a one-shot to introduce new players to the campaign. A lot of the times players have played through this dungeon and they've loved it. They've enjoyed it so much they've continued playing. I've actually never had a player play through this dungeon and stop. Every single player that I've introduced to D&D through this dungeon has continued to play for many adventures to come. So I highly recommend this product, and I highly recommend the Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition Red Box. This is the Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition Red Box review, or the encounter review, or the adventure review. I hope you've enjoyed, guys. Have a great day.